As much fun as it was for me to revisit a bunch of classic animated shows, I think it's healthy to smell the roses and realize they weren't perfect. I don't think any show is. There's always a small but noticeable margin of error, and the longer a show goes on, the more chance it has of boring or frustrating its viewers eventually, either briefly or in the long run. So I think it's fair I also go back to the worst episodes of each show I've talked about this year and further understand the ugly side of some of them, even the ones that rank among my all-time favorite pieces of media. But remember, just because these are the worst episodes doesn't necessarily mean they're awful or anything. They just exhibit the particular show's nastiest habits. Again, one pick per series, and you're allowed to think differently from me. If you like these episodes, or there are ones you hate more than I do, that's fine. Enough fairness for now, here's the worst episodes of each show I've reviewed in 2019. Number 13, The Princess and the Bounty Hunters, Samurai Jack. In all honesty, I can see what they were trying to do here. A group of brand spanking new bounty hunters plan ways to capture Jack in a cabin, half of them getting on my nerves before too long, and neat art styles notwithstanding, just padding out the plot. After the know-it-all Boba Fett reveals herself to be a princess of a broken kingdom, she concocts a plan so meticulous that it's sad when it comes off as so boring and useless. We get 2 whole minutes of the characters just waiting in the snow, which lacks the atmosphere that made other slower Jack episodes so immersive. Above all else, I think this was meant to be a display of the large community of bounty hunters that want to kill Jack, but what good are they as POV pieces if Jack barely has any reaction to them? If you like this one, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just didn't entice me. Number 12, With Friends Like These, Rocko's Modern Life. I wouldn't really call this episode bland or boring like a couple other later Rocko episodes tended to be, but it was the one that annoyed me the most. Heifer and Philbert really want to go to a wrestling match, and when Rocko accidentally gets the 2 tickets they want, they pester him to heck and back to go with him. The thing is, neither one deserves the tickets more than the other. They're equally annoying and I can't root for them, and Rocko ends up being relatable here once again, but in the context of his best friends driving him crazy and almost killing him after a while. The reason it doesn't go any higher on the list, however, is that, to be reasonable, it does have some good jokes here and there.
Hey Rocco! Remember we saw the movie here together
and keeps that Rocko irreverence from start to finish. But if the story itself is this annoying, should I care? Number 11, Clash of the Cousins, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. My biggest problem with this episode lies in the characters, most of which is Hugh's family, and they put his face on all these different bodies and it weirds me out, not helping the fact they're an unpleasant bunch who hate Jimmy's intellect. So when a birthday party goes awry from faulty technology, of course they blame him and send him inside without a second thought. Then after some meandering around trying to figure out who the real villain in the family is, it's revealed to be baby Gerald, who has the exact same model as Grandma Neutron from 2 seasons earlier, and a plan to kill his whole family for their money. The fact is, it's weird, but not that Jimmy Neutron brand of weird that keeps you hooked. It just comes off as a spotty, uncanny slog. Number 10, I Was a Preschool Dropout, My Life as a Teenage Robot. There's an alright concept at play here, Jenny being physically 5 years old, and therefore needing to go to kindergarten. Weird implication, she was confined to her room for 5 years, but still, the idea isn't bad by itself. The bad thing is that not a single character here is likable or reasonable. The kids, I can understand because they're kids, but Jenny lacking empathy for them and not understanding that she has to be more careful around them doesn't make an interesting crux to the whole shebang. And the teacher she has, who doesn't listen to her whatsoever, even when it threatens her ability to succeed, weighs the episode down further. Something's amiss when the best part is when Jenny wails on the kids with a ball. Not because of the substance, but the style. The colours and staging is classic Teenage Robot through and through, but I wish I could say the same for the songs, which are guilty pleasures at best. Number 9, X Marks the Ed, 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 and Eddy. A lot of people will point to the meanest, most joyless episodes of the show as their personal least favourites, but I had to pick the one that I felt wasted the most of my time. Eddy gets a pimple out of nowhere, you have to watch a minute of fishing jokes before the story starts, and the pimple seems to grow the more attention it receives. Unsurprisingly, the rest of the cul-de-sac is enamored with it, and Eddy gets unreasonably scared and vulnerable for his character. Maybe they could go into how vain he is, but instead the episode relies on gross out with the pimple that doesn't go all out but isn't a pretty sight either. But then the episode goes from lame to just obnoxious when Rolf does some witch doctor remedies, shrinking Eddie's head in the process, and then the episode just ends. And the title implying a treasure hunt and the title card implying something about pizza really seals the deal, as this one probably being one the staff wanted to bury. Number 8, Uneasy Rider, The Critic. Because there weren't many episodes of this show, there wasn't as much room for error as with other shows that went on for multiple seasons, but the first season could get a little boring at points, and this is one of those boring episodes. Jay quits his job over the intrusion of tobacco advertisements and finds his original life calling as a trucker. Gotta tell you, this is the most exciting part. The jokes are either very lame or borrowed from other episodes, and it doesn't feel like Jay's developed a real rapport with his new trucker friends, or that he's learned anything substantial by the end. After 10 minutes of gags, they go to a bad movie, tell him he needs to go back to reviewing, and bada bing bada boom, story complete. If there's anything good I can say about Uneasy Rider, is that it's a good idea on paper, and there are some cozy scenes and a decent gag here and there. Number 7, Touched by a Teacher, Brotown. Nothing like a good old angry mob story about child abuse allegations, am I right? Here, there's this Scottish welfare lady that succeeds at manipulating Mac into saying he's been groomed by his teacher, Brother Kin, and she's immediately arrested and nearly executed later on. The execution simply because Mac doesn't just tell Morningside the truth and put all the hassle to rest. It seems they might have been trying to write a polar opposite story at one point, that he was groomed and he has a hard time coming out about it, but doing it like this makes him so much harder to sympathize with, and the happy ending where Lucy Lawless lectures the mob into changing their minds, well, they used a guest star efficiently this time, albeit at the expense of our protagonist developing in any way. Morningside for death, am I right? Number 6, Too Tall Tales, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. I haven't seen every episode of the video game cartoons, because if you've seen one, you've seen them all, but this was the weakest episode of the Sonic cartoon that I've seen. Robotnik has kidnapped Professor von Schlemmer and forced him to help him and his minions to make a growth ray, while Sonic and Tails stop for lunch at Wienerville. No, not that Wienerville, or that one, and Tails ravages through all the chili dogs. So guess what happens? The growth ray breaks, the gas seeps into Wienerville and turns Tails, and only Tails mind you, into a giant. More annoying than his belly randomly being drawn at different sizes depending on the day of the week, is Robotnik easily manipulating the Wiener people into thinking Sonic's the bad guy. I already don't trust them for being cannibals, but why make them complete idiots? I'm sure you're expecting me to make a food pun, like this episode left a bad taste in my mouth, and okay, I'll bite. Number 5, Ponyville Confidential, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Imagine being afraid of roller coasters but having to stay on one for half an hour. That's what this one feels like. The Cutie Mark Crusaders join their school's newspaper, but Diamond Tiara demands that they churn out gossip. So they do, it spreads over Ponyville and everyone reads it and everyone likes it until they're featured. The thing is, their lives don't seem to be ruined, they just seem frustrated and embarrassed. This isn't good at all, paired with the main 6 being used as examples of this petty line of thinking, and the Crusaders have all the time in the world to retire but choose not to. It culminates in this very horrible, sour couple of minutes where it feels like everyone on the planet is miserable. I don't even care about the sappy apology and all that, because it isn't worth watching this episode again, and it never will be. Number 4, The Kangaskhan Kid, Pokemon. Let me just say that I don't mind the filler episodes as much as other fans of the anime, but when an episode like this comes along that's so annoying it's kinda sad, then I have a serious problem. Ash and his friends stumble into a Pokemon nature reserve, then take a back seat to this Tarzan boy called Tommy who thinks he's one of the Kangaskhan. Why? Because his father dropped him out of a helicopter when he was 3. Look, I like some episodes that have awful one-off characters, but Tommy's parents are full-on insufferable, choosing in the end to live with the Kangaskhan as well to make their son feel better. Cooked meals and shelter may be the better options in improving your son's life, you ignoramai. There are other issues with the episode, like Ash taking a back seat to all this madness, Team Rocket turning up twice just for the sake of it, and overall just being unfocused and useless as a story. Guarantees this will be my least favorite episode of the anime for a long time. And apparently the people who run the Pokemon website don't like it either. since they didn't even bother to cut out the bumpers.
We'll be back after these messages. And now back to our show.
Number 3, a made-up story, the Powerpuff Girls. I'm convinced this episode was written by a traffic light. There's no pace to anything, be it the jokes or the story that's scraped across the floor for 20 minutes. An old villain comes back to haunt the city of Townsville, a has-been makeup artist called either Mascara or Mascara, they keep changing it. One by one the girls start to get her, gasp, terrible makeup that won't come off unless they beat Mascara. This story is so lame it hurts, but I'm sure it would have been fine in the early seasons and if it were an 11-minute episode and it was more self-aware, and I'm basically saying, yeah, it could have been good if it was good. At least we get confirmation that, yes indeed, the narrator has arms. That's the thing, this episode's funny once every 5 minutes, but it's simply not worth the wait. Let's just say it's out of style and leave it at that. Number 2, Bad Rap, the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. In one of the many worlds of the Mushroom Land in this incarnation of the Mario franchise, everyone loves rap music and talks in rhymes, and they hammer that in 100 times. But putting aside the dated service-level aesthetic, it's confounding they made an episode about rapping this boring and unexciting. Sure, things happen. I think Princess Toadstool and this King James guy almost die on a giant record player while Mario and Luigi are busy retreating, but there isn't any weight to it because the gimmick completely overshadows everything else. Also, I don't know if I should be complaining about continuity and lore in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show of all cartoons, but I don't like how this is apparently the origin of the show's theme song. It's like they ran out of things to do with the genre, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to make an episode this shallow in content. Number 1, Rens Brain, the Ren and Stimpy show. They were on their last leg at this point, so it's no wonder a show that prioritizes shock value can have a worse episode that, at this point in the series, has no shock or value. Stimpy's a scientist again, a brain surgeon to be precise, and he steals Ren's brain for research, but the brain goes to work unaware of what's going on, which is kind of boring, and Stimpy plays with the brain-dead corpse of his best friend, which is really boring. Then when the brain comes back, they get into this fight scene that's so bad the audience watching explodes, then America explodes, then the world ends? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Ren and Stimpy can be a dumb show sometimes. It needs to be a dumb show sometimes. But this is the laziest way to close out a story I've ever seen in a cartoon. For now, at least. I don't plan on stopping YouTube anytime soon. Granted, it's still around by the time of my next review, but here's hoping it is. Join me next year in 2020 as I go back to the Pokemon world for a semi-vacation, chill with a deceptively down-to-earth black family, and prepare to have mine and your craziest wishes fulfilled. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and goodbye for now.